Luke chapter 9. I chose a title this morning of A Learning Experience. A Learning Experience. And this passage is, it has a couple sister passages, Matthew 17 and Mark 9, and we're going to read those after we read the Luke passage. So if you'd like to turn there and read along, that's perfectly fine. Matthew 17 and Mark 9, I'll have them on the screen though. They record this same incident, and they have some different details that they include that Luke didn't for whatever reason. And so in this story, there's a learning experience. There's a learning experience for a father. There's a learning experience for the disciples, and I believe there's also a learning experience for us today. So if you follow along, please, I'll read verses 37 through the first part of verse 43. And it came to pass that on the next day, when they were come down from the hill, much people met him. And behold, a man of the company cried out, saying, Master, I beseech thee, look upon my son, for he is mine only son. Lo, a spirit taketh him, and he suddenly crieth out, and it teareth him, that he foameth again, and bruising him hardly, departeth from him. And I besought thy disciples to cast him out, and they could not. Jesus answering said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and suffer you? Bring thy son hither. And as he was yet a-coming, the devil threw him down and tare him, and Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit and healed the child and delivered him again to his father. Verse 43, and they were all amazed at the mighty power of God. And we'll save that last part of verse 43 for next week. Matthew 17, verses 14 through 21, record Matthew's account of this. And when they were come to the multitude, there came to him a certain man, kneeling down to him, saying, Lord, have mercy on my son, for he is lunatic and sore vexed, for oftentimes he falleth into the fire, and oft into the water. And I brought him to thy disciples, and they could not cure him. Then Jesus answered and said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him hither to me. Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him, and the child was cured from that very hour. Then came the disciples to Jesus apart and said, Why could not we cast him out? And Jesus said unto them, Because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, Remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible to you. Howbeit, this kind goeth out not but by prayer and fasting. Now, Mark 9, beginning in verse 14. And when he came to his disciples, he saw a great multitude about them, and the scribes questioning with them. And straightway all the people, when they beheld him, were greatly amazed, and running to him, saluted him. And he asked the scribes, What question ye with them? One of the multitude answered and said, Master, I have brought unto thee my son, which hath a dumb spirit. And wheresoever he taketh him, he teareth him, and he foameth, and gnasheth with his teeth, and pineth away. And I spake to thy disciples that they should cast him out, and they could not. He answereth him and saith, O faithless generation, how long shall I be with you? How long shall I suffer you? Bring him unto me. And they brought him unto him. And when he saw him, straightway the spirit tare him, and he fell on the ground, and wallowed foaming. And he asked his father, How long is it ago since this came unto him? And he said, Of a child. And ofttimes it hath cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. Jesus said unto him, If thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe, help thou mine unbelief. When Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more into him. The spirit cried and rent him sore and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch as many said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. And when he was come into the house, his disciples asked him privately, Why could not we cast him out? He said unto them, This kind come forth by nothing, but by prayer and fasting. This morning I'd like us to look at this one story through all three passages, because they all three piece together this story for us. I'd like to look at it in relation to three different groups. The first group is the Father and His Son. The Father and His Son. And regarding the Father and His Son, the first thing we see is the external manifestation. The external manifestation. As I read these stories, no doubt the external symptoms stood out to you. Terrible. Son, his only child, the only child he had, often casts himself into a fire. And sometimes he casts himself into the water. Other times he's foaming at the mouth, gnashing his teeth. I think of gnashing of teeth, if you've ever watched a movie where they portray zombies, that's kind of like how the zombies are trying to eat the people and everything like that. That's what I think of when I hear gnashing of teeth. He's physically distressed such that at times he cries out. Other times he's deeply bruised and hurt. The word used in verse 38, it says that, verse 38, where am I looking here? It teareth him. There it is. It teareth him. Sorry, verse 39. That's where it is. It's the same word that the Bible uses and the Greek language uses to describe the devastation after an earthquake. And afterward it tells us in verse 42, And as he was yet coming, the devil threw him down and tare him. That's why some thought he was dead. In other words, the aftermath of the Son having gone through these things, having done these things, it's almost as though he went through an earthquake. Just like the earthquake splits open the ground and throws things up and down and moves things all over the place. And what does it leave? Wreckage. Hazard wreckage. It has no regard for anything. And that's how the Son basically looked after he was done. And in one case, they even thought he was dead. Now, this description of the Son is very reminiscent of someone with epilepsy. Some have gone so far to say that he was epileptic, not possessed of a demon. The Father's response, of course, to Jesus asking him how long has he been like this is since a child. Now, it says that he was a child and he's his son, so we don't know his exact age, but we're guessing that since he was probably close to an infant, this has been happening. And now he's many, many years old. This is not a one-time occurrence or a couple-time occurrence. This has been happening over and over and over again. The Father lived in an unknowing state, never knowing when his Son was going to suddenly display all these symptoms and this was going to happen to him. Now, the reason I painted in that light is because if you look at this from a medical standpoint, all of those things are symptoms. They're not the problem. All of these things that happen to him, the bruising is a symptom. It's not the problem. They're outward expressions of what's actually going on inside the boy. The internal situation, which we see next, is that the boy is frequently overcome by a demon that possesses him and makes him do all these things that harm him. Now, Jesus has dealt with situations like this before. Consider back to the maniac of Gadara. Sometimes the maniac of Gadara was normal. And remember, at times he was normal and they were able to lock him up and they put him in chains. But whenever that demon took over, what did he do? He busted out of the chains and went out and caused havoc everywhere. This boy seems to be in somewhat of the same situation. There's days that he lives a normal life, or whatever can be considered normal. And other days he's possessed by a demon that makes him attempt suicide, casting him into the fire, casting him into the water to kill him, makes him act like a wild animal, shakes him like an earthquake. Consider the father's thought. This would be devastating if this was your child. It would be absolutely devastating, knowing your only child is so heavily oppressed and there's nothing that you can do about it. No doctor was ever able to cure him. No religious leader had been able to save him from this demon. And even here, he says, he consulted with Jesus' own disciples, and guess what? They couldn't do anything. It's devastating. But this father's situation brought him to a place where he makes what I've called the particular solicitation. The events of this passage, it says, take place the day after the transfiguration. Peter, James, John, and Jesus are coming down the mountain. They've spent the night there, and immediately they encountered the other 9 disciples in a crowd with the scribes, and the scribes are questioning them. They spot Jesus, everybody runs up to Jesus, and he asks the scribes the question in Mark 9:16, "What question ye with them?" Out of the crowd, this father cries out. He solicits Jesus' help for this problem. In Matthew 17:15, it says he cried out for mercy. In Luke 9:38, it says he called Jesus Master and said, "I beseech thee, I'm begging you to do something." Mark 9:22 records the father's other plea. And oft times they had cast him into the fire and into the waters to destroy him. But if thou canst do anything, have compassion on us and help us. The words of this father show that they're the words of a man at his wit's end. A man ready to give up. If you can do anything. Nobody else has been able to do anything, but can Jesus help? You can almost feel the sheer anguish in his heart as he's been experienced for year after year after year. This man and his son are pictures of the world we live in today. On one hand, we have people like the son, possessed, oppressed, absolutely torn and devastated by the wreckage of sin in their lives and throughout the earth. On the other hand, we have people like the father, lost, wandering, at their wits' end, nowhere else to turn, no direction, no hope. They've turned to everything and every other self-help book that's come out and every other psychiatrist book that's come out and told them, here's how you do this and this is what you do, and guess what? They've all left empty. Not saying that there couldn't be help in some of those things, but they've left them empty. And the father asked Jesus, if you can do anything, have compassion on us. It's fascinating. Have compassion on us. Why is that fascinating? He was calling on Jesus to display who he was. Jesus is compassion. How many times have we read, and if you were to go through the rest of the Gospels and read, how many times does Jesus walk up to a situation and he had compassion on them? Compassion was the very reason Jesus was on the earth in the first place. That's why he was there. God so loved the world that he sent his son. Why? Because he had compassion on them, in our lost state. Here, this father asked Jesus, do what you do best. Be compassionate and help us. What we see happen next in this account is the individual solution. The individual solution. Mark 9:23, Jesus said unto him, if thou canst believe, all things are possible to him that believeth. Jesus didn't call on the crowd to believe. He wasn't asking the son to believe. Jesus wasn't calling on himself, oh Jesus, if you can believe, you might be able to do this thing this time. That's not what he was doing. He was calling on the Father to believe, on the Father to have faith. As I said before, Jesus has dealt with this thing before. So it's not really a matter of, can Jesus do this? Because we know Jesus can do this. He's done it before. Rather, it was a matter of this. Did the Father believe Jesus could do this? Now, the thing is, the Father had a lot of reasons not to believe. What I said before, the failure of all the doctors, the failure of all the religious leaders, the scribes, the Pharisees, the failure of the disciples, the failure of anybody else that he consulted with. All of them failed. So did he have an excuse not to have belief that somebody else could do something? Yeah. After so many times of being said, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, we can't do this, guess what you start to think? I don't think anybody can do this. He had a lot of excuses not to have faith. But another fascinating thing is his response. And straightway the father of the child cried out and said with tears, Lord, I believe. Help thou mine unbelief. In other words, I have some faith. I have some faith. Not great faith. Remember back to chapter 7 in the centurion that we looked at. He had great faith. But this father doesn't have great faith. He had a little bit of faith. But in his little bit of faith, there was also some unbelief, some lack of faith. And the good news is, Jesus didn't say, you need to have great faith. Jesus didn't say, you got to have all the faith in the world in order for me to do this. No, he simply said this, have some faith. And the man said, I have faith, but I also have doubts. There's also some unbelief. What Jesus is going to say to his disciples at the end of the story is they didn't even need great faith to cast out this demon. Just faith like a mustard seed. Faith like a mustard seed could move a mountain. Jesus didn't require great faith. He didn't require it then, and he doesn't require it now. See, you might not all understand all the ins and outs of Christianity. Most people that come to faith in Christ, they don't have everything lined out in front of them completely and understood and logical in their mind. But no, they come believing a little bit, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. They come with a little faith, a little belief in Him, and Jesus is able to save in that state. And the amazing thing is, if you ask for His help with the unbelief, the compassionate Jesus will help with your unbelief. His father's faith is obviously recorded because the son was healed. Mark 9. When Jesus saw the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit, saying unto him, Thou dumb and deaf spirit, I charge thee, come out of him and enter no more into him. The spirit cried and rent him sore and came out of him, and he was as one dead, insomuch that many said, He is dead. But Jesus took him by the hand and lifted him up, and he arose. Luke records, and they were all amazed at the mighty power of God. First, we see this story through the eyes of the Father and His Son. But that's not the end of the story, or the full emphasis of the story. We also see it through the eyes of the disciples and Jesus. And again, we see an external manifestation. The outward symptom that's revealed to us about the other 9 disciples that tried to cast out this demon is that the external manifestation was they couldn't. Verse 40 says, I besought thy disciples to cast him out, and guess what? They could not. And it appears that's why the scribes were questioning them. That's why the scribes were like, hey, why can't you do this? What's the deal here? I mean, you've been going out casting out demons, you've been healing people, you've been doing all these things, and now all of a sudden you can't help this boy? Remember back to verse 1 of chapter 9. What did Jesus do? Then he called his 12 disciples together and gave them power over and authority over all devils and to cure all diseases, and he sent them to preach the kingdom of God and to heal the sick. And then in verse 10, they came back to him and told him all that they had been doing. And now, even though they had the power, Jesus gave them the power to do this. Now, imagine yourself in their shoes. As they're trying to cast out this devil, and they're saying everything and doing everything that they've always done, and nothing's happening. And one disciple does it, and the next, and the next, and the next, and the next. The pressure seems to be building in the crowd as each successive disciple fails to do anything. Maybe some in the crowd began to mock them. But this external symptom was simply an outworking of the internal situation. Verse 41, and Jesus answering said, O faithless and perverse generation, how long shall I be with you and suffer you? The word perverse there means to mislead, to cause to turn away from correct behavior. In other words, the internal problem, the internal situation was this: they didn't have the faith that they should have. As I've mentioned, this is about the 3-year mark in Jesus' ministry on earth. There's about 6 months left. And all they've seen, all they've heard, all they knew and have learned about Jesus, the power that he held, all that they had even done, and the power that they were able to use of Jesus's to do all these things, and yet they lacked faith that that power would remain sufficient. Therefore, by their failure to have faith, what they were doing is they were misleading the people. They were causing others to be misled about the truth of Jesus because of their lack of faith. If you remember Psalm 73 that I preached as the first candidating message here. In Psalm 73, Asaph didn't tell others about his concern and the problem he saw with the wicked. Why did he not do that? Because he was concerned about misleading and causing other children of God to leave and go worship with the wicked. That's what these disciples were doing. By not having faith, what they have now caused is they're causing people to doubt Jesus. And Jesus' words echo a seeming sense of frustration almost. He knows time's limited. Yet over and over and over again, the disciples have continued to display faithlessness at times. His words are actually an echo of Moses. In Deuteronomy 32:20, he says this, and he said, I will hide my face from them. I will see what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children in whom is no faith. Moses here was showing frustration in the Israelites for their continued lack of faith in God. Even with all the miracles and wonders Jesus had done for them, or God had done for them, over and over and over again throughout, what did they do time and time again? Walked away. They murmured. They whined. They complained. They turned their back on God. And they what? Misled others to go in the same direction. With all that they knew, they should have had faith in Him. But they didn't. The internal situation was made even clearer during the particular solicitation. I had fun finding these words, if you can't tell. Matthew and Mark record that after this boy was healed, they were in a private place. And the disciples asked Jesus, why could not we cast him out? What? Yeah, Jesus gave them this hint while they were out there in the crowd, but clearly it didn't click in their brains. And so when they get together with Jesus alone, they say, why couldn't we do anything? And Jesus answers in Matthew 17. And Jesus said unto them, because of your unbelief. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place. Remember, they just came down the mountain from the Mount of Transfiguration. If you say to this mountain, go over there, and you have a grain of a mustard seed faith, the mountain will go over there. He even follows it up with this. Faith the size of a mustard seed, nothing's impossible for you. I'd bet that, having said that, the room was as quiet, you could literally hear a pin drop. No, I'm guessing they were all a little bit convicted. Jesus pointing out their lack of belief. A mustard seed is very small. Some say it's the smallest seed. I don't know that that's 100% accurate, but the mustard seed's, super tiny. But what's remarkable about the mustard seed is it grows up into a taller plant. And that one mustard seed can produce a plant that's so many thousand times its own size and can produce so many thousands more mustard seeds. It's amazing. It's remarkable. And Jesus uses faith as a mustard seed. With just a little bit of faith, you can move a mountain. Now, Jesus wasn't trying to get them to move mountains. They didn't need to move a mountain. That wasn't the point of the illustration. It was to illustrate, you don't have to have all the faith in the world. If you just had a little faith, you could have cast out this demon. If you just had a little faith, if you needed to move a mountain, you could have done that too. Yet the problem was, they had no faith. And Jesus further explained this, the individual solution. And he said unto them, this kind can come forth by nothing, but by prayer and fasting. Almost seems contradictory. They could have done it with faith, yes. They had to have faith. They must believe. But here Jesus reveals that part of the outworking of their faith, the outward or the external manifestation of their faith would have been prayer and fasting. It's interesting to note this. Not every problem is solved immediately. Prayer and fasting takes time. It doesn't happen like that. So not every problem is going to be solved immediately. They weren't going to cast out the demon immediately. They needed to pray. They needed to spend time communing with God, asking for His power, asking for His help, calling on God to give them guidance and understanding and wisdom about how to handle this situation. They couldn't walk into every situation and expect that in every situation they were going to be able to apply the exact same scenario. It wasn't going to work like that. Some situations require an extra measure of prayer. And not only prayer, they also needed to fast. Fasting is the practice specifically of abstaining from food, but you could apply fasting to many other different things if you wanted to. But specifically regarding food is fasting. In the morning, we eat what? Breakfast. Break fast. That's the literal meaning, is it? We are breaking the fast since the last time we ate. And technically every time we eat, we're breaking our fast since the last time we ate. But this fasting is a little more intuitive. I like the way the website gotquestions.org describes it. Too often the focus of fasting is on the lack of food. Instead, the purpose of fasting should be to take your eyes off the things of this world to focus completely on God. Fasting is a way to demonstrate to God and to ourselves that we are serious about our relationship with Him. Fasting helps us gain a new perspective and a renewed reliance upon God. Saying that we need God in this equation. Prayer and fasting is not, however, a magic formula. It's not going to suddenly give or get us whatever we're praying and fasting about. Rather, it does build our faith in Jesus. It does reveal to us, it reveals to others potentially, and reveals to God how serious we are about a matter. In their case, they needed to pray and fast to cast out the demon and heal this child. Now I'd like us to consider this from another angle. You and your life, me and my life, our church life. I'm confident that every one of us could identify a problem that we're facing. We see the external manifestations of that problem, whatever it might be in our life. But underneath the external, there's an internal situation, the root of the problem. And I don't know what problem you're facing necessarily. I might know in some sense, but what problem are you facing? What need has risen in your life? What sickness are you and your family dealing with? Maybe it says, outside of personal needs, what about our church? What needs does our church have? What problems could our church be facing? Maybe not even right now. Maybe we should be considering this and taking this learning experience, tucking it away in the back of our brain for the future when we do face a problem where we can say, what do we do? What can we do oh, we can't do anything. So what do we need to do? What are we going to do when a problem arises and there's nothing that we can do? Have you asked Jesus for help? Have you gone to Jesus with not a general prayer of, Jesus, help us with our problems, but no. Have you gone to Jesus in prayer and asked Him particularly, this is what I'm praying about. This is what I need help for. This is where I need understanding. This is what I need wisdom and guidance and understanding in. A true anguish of the heart, calling for His compassion and mercy. But not only that, what would Jesus say if He was right here? What would Jesus say if you said to Him, why couldn't I do that? Why can't we do that? Why are we being hindered from doing this? What would Jesus say if we came before Him as a church and told Him, Jesus, I know we're your church, but we can't do about any of this stuff? What would He say? What critique would He offer us? Would He be able to accuse us of a lack of faith? Would He be able to accuse us of misleading others? Maybe not intentionally, certainly not intentionally, but maybe unintentionally. As a result of our faithlessness, misleading others. If we were to have a private audience with Jesus and ask why all of these problems in our life haven't been solved, what would Jesus say the solution to our problem is? In the same way, the Father was required to believe in order for His Son's healing. Today, we have to believe in order for our healing. I'm not talking necessarily physically, although that could be applicable, but more spiritually. These miracles of Jesus that we've studied and looked at over and over and over again, and all the other ones that he did, they were real events. They truly did happen. I do believe that. But they're also a picture of the whole of humanity. The people that Jesus interacted with are the same people that lived 1,000 years before Jesus. They're the same people that lived 1,000 years after Jesus, and they're the same people that lived 2,000 years after Jesus. We may not have their symptoms specifically like they had, their diseases and everything like that, but we're all possessed with the same disease, if you will. And I know some don't like calling sin a disease. If you don't like that, I'm sorry. It's a unique wording to put it. We're all sick. We're all dying. We're all possessed with a nature of sin. And we all need to be healed. We all can be healed. Healing is available to us. Jesus' death on the cross, it paid the debt that was owed for us. His broken body, His bloodless body, is the right word I was looking for. Just as He said to this Father, He can help. The ability of Jesus to heal us is not what's in question. The question is, do you believe He can heal you? Do you have faith that He can heal you? In the instance of our salvation, it's whether or not you have faith that what He's already done on the cross is what's healed you. Maybe you're holding on to faith in yourself. Maybe today, some of you need to believe. Maybe you need to believe. Maybe you've heard me over and over and over again invite you to put your faith in Jesus over and over again, yet for some reason you have not. There could be many reasons that is, but it could be this. You don't think you have enough faith to believe in Jesus. Yeah, you've mustered a little bit of faith, but can Jesus really save me if all I have is a little faith? I submit to you, you don't need my faith. You don't need the faith of others in here that have faith way beyond my faith. Come to God with your little faith. Come to God with your mustard seed faith. And He'll take your little faith and He'll save you, and He'll grow your faith. In conclusion, something that's been on my mind lately is how I close our messages. Typically, I close just with a prayer. I believe that's in some ways a disservice to you, because it fails really to give you a time to consider and respond to the message. I understand you can do that on your own time, but once we end and say amen, we're off to talk to so-and-so about such and such, and we're getting out of here because I got to get out of here, and we're already past 12:30, and all these things. We're busy, we got things to do and places to be. So what do? We forget. So from now on, I'm going to begin asking everybody to bow their heads and take a minute or two, and then I'll close this in prayer. And the purpose of that time is going to be allow us to consider the implications of the passage. And it may be that the implications of this passage for you had absolutely nothing to do with what I talked about the whole time. It's to give us a moment to allow the Spirit's conviction, allow us to personally pray and do business with God. The father in this instance needed a learning experience of faith in God to help with his unbelief. The disciples needed the learning experience of faith in God worked out through prayer and fasting. But what's the learning experience for you? See, the reality is Jesus is able to solve even the most difficult of problems. But too often we put our faith in ourselves. When if we would put our faith in Him, we'd find out and realize, oh, we've got the entire kingdom of heaven at our disposal. So what's your learning experience from this passage? What faith do you need to have? What problem are you facing that maybe you need to spend some time in prayer and spend some time fasting? So bow your head with me for a minute in consideration of these lessons, and I'll pray personally, and then I'll close this in prayer here in a moment.